That's kind of that old thing of how do you define significantly. We are making increases on that. What one person would consider significant, another wouldn't. But tools are in place, making sure that the classroom teacher, the principals, have the necessary funds and resources to help them work with the individual student, especially those on the low end, to give them the basis early. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll go to the next question. We have a number of questions here from concerned parents from the Chauncey Rose Middle School. And I'm trying to, I think I will go ahead and ask these separately, although they will relate. The first part of this, and I'm trying to think just about how much time we might need for this one. The first question is one of support, and this one we can do in 1 minute. And we will begin with you, Tammy. The first question is, have you read and are you familiar with the Schmidt Associates feasibility report? And do you support closing Chauncey Rose Middle School?
The answer to that question for me is no, I have not read the Schmidt report. I am not currently on the board, and I have not actually read that, but I am aware that the Schmidt and Associates were contacted from the board to come and evaluate the situation with Chauncey Rose. The answer to am I in agreement for closing Chauncey Rose? I am never in agreement of closing any school. I think that schools are there for teaching, for the students, and I think that they're local schools. These kids are used to those schools, walking distance, some of them, to these schools. And for the parents, that's their transportation, is walking distance. So I am not. With saying that, I think that we also have to know if we're giving the taxpayers what they need for, what they're getting. And is the money available there for the renovation or keeping that school open? So I think, I need to read the Schmidt and Associate report, but I am never for closing a school.
I have read the Schmidt and Associates report. I have to rely on it because I'm not a construction engineer, and their knowledge of the facility is far greater than mine. As far as closing the school, I think it would be inappropriate for me to say yes or no right now. When the question is posed to the board, I think it's important that at that time we weigh all the factors and weigh those against the costs of maintaining the school or closing the school. There are a lot more factors than just the dollars and cents that go into maintaining a school. You have to look at the neighborhood and what it would do to those families and the surrounding area.
I am not in favor of closing Chauncey Rose. I understand this year the population there has dropped by about 60. We're down to 320, something, 330, something, if I remember right. It's a very small population for a middle school. But we also need to look at the population that it serves. We're dealing with one of the most poverty-stricken areas in Vigo County that is served by that school, by that community. In my entire lifetime, I was raised in that neighborhood, so maybe I'm partial with this also. There's been a school there forever. It's served that community, and it's served that community well. Perhaps the building needs to be replaced eventually. I know it was built for a short-term purpose, and it's maybe outlived its usefulness. But the community needs to be served by that school, in my opinion.
Well, as far as the Schmidt report goes, I don't know if any of you remember when that happened a few years ago, and they had some public meetings, and they invited people to the meeting, but it was poorly ran. Questions were, if you gave a question that had any kind of conflict with what they said, they just turned around and sugarcoated it and made it sound like, oh, Chauncey Rose has to come down, and we have to do this, 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 and this. So it was really poorly run as far as I thought of communication with the people and getting the real opinions of the people out. And for the thousands of dollars that they spent on the report, I know it's mentioned we're not engineers, but I think all of us have common sense, and that was a waste of money. That's another one of the ways the corporation wastes money. And all of the evaluation of who will be going, that our population is going down. I'm all for having a vision, but I think we need to pay attention to right now.
I have read and am familiar with the Schmidt report recommending to close Chauncey Rose. They conducted a facility study, and based on the facility's condition and the trend in enrollment and other factors, they recommended to close Chauncey Rose. I personally am against closing any school. Before we decide to close any school, we should make an informed decision. As a board member, I have a responsibility to do that. I think the number one thing that we should inform ourselves about before closing any school is the profound impact on the community. Will the children have a support system, especially at Chauncey Rose, where they had one in the school? They need to have it at the new school. I would like to see a plan from the administration talking about redistricting, keeping the teachers and the class sizes the way they are, and counseling for the students if they do close Chauncey Rose. Thank you.
I also am in favor of neighborhood schools, and especially that neighborhood, because there's three of us sitting up here that grew up in that neighborhood. Raise your hand. So all of us were from that neighborhood. But as I said before, you can look at this another way too. You can say, okay, we're going to look at closing. You might look at it, what can we do to keep it open, instead of what can we do to close that. But still, it's going to come down to finances, and it's going to come. You're going to have facility reports, projected enrollments, transportation, class size, staffing, other facilities, and all those things are involved. And like I've not been on the board, so I would have to be informed of all those things. But if we can keep it there, then I would be for that. If it's financially fiscal responsibility to do that. Thank you.
As some others have said, not being on the board, no, I have not read the Schmidt report. Obviously, before any decision's made, any board member who would say how they're going to vote one way or another, it's rather premature. We are not supposed to take a position before anything goes before the board. That being said, I would have to have some awfully compelling evidence that's different from what I've heard from others who have read the report as to what's in that. There's so many factors you have to look at. We have consolidated so many schools. And anytime you close a school, you lose a sense of identity that's there. It's not just a matter of how much money it's going to take. We talk about how much it would take to renovate that facility. We've renovated a lot of other facilities. There are a lot of things we need to look at. We need to look at other options that can be in there, and what needs to be done to help that school, help that part of our community, because we need Chauncey Rose there to help our community.
I've definitely read the Schmidt report. I feel like I lived with it for a while because we spent a lot of time with it. But they were estimated $10 million to redo the school. But that was a list of, if you had all the money in the world, what would you do to this school? It's not necessarily what had to be done. They had a list of priorities, which is much less than that. The first thing you have to do is you have to spend $2.5 million on Wilson and $2.5 million on Otter Creek, they said, to accommodate the students you're going to move. I'm not sure why you wouldn't spend some of that money there and keep the school there. I think it's a self-fulfilling prophecy when you talk about closing the school because it lowers morale. Some parents move their kids out of the school because they think they're going to be out later anyway. Some of those students or some of your higher scoring students, your test scores go down. It's a snowball once it gets started. I also wonder what impact it's going to have on Woodrow Wilson Otter Creek because they're going to be very big middle schools if you try to close Chauncey Rose. So I think we ought to keep it there, frankly, even though I shouldn't make a judgment until I get all the facts. But I've had a lot of the facts, and I've pretty much made my judgment unless some sinking of the Titanic comes along or something. I can't picture changing.